Thank you, Julie, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this lunchtime webinar, where we're very privileged to have Mike Walters, who's going to do a presentation for us on an update of the HSE. So just to give Mike a bit of a big up, he's been working with the HSE now for nearly 30 years and has a very wide range of experiences across agriculture, manufacturing and services and public sector. Mike has also regularly worked with the police and Crown prosecution services on various magistrates' courts and supported some very serious cases through the Crown courts as well. Mike has recently just changed his role and he's now working with various new inspectors as Operation Development Manager, and his current role manages a team of construction inspectors covering Kent, Sussex and Surrey. So, like I say, we're very privileged to have Mike here today, and without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mike and let him get on with his presentation. So over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And hello to everybody that's online. I am going to kill my camera just because it may
I've just done that
everything.
For you, Mike.
Oh,
I've done that for you. Change your camera.
Thank you. I'm getting confused by everything that's popping up. And it's now saying screen sharing is paused. So hopefully you can see the screen, and
yes.
Yeah, I'm going to give you quite a quick run through, quite a canter through some of the things that have happened in HSE through my eyes in the southeast over the last year, and what to look forward to as we're going through this current work year of 22 to 2023, so ending March next year. Give you an option for questions at the end, which hopefully Paul will pick up on. Paul sort of gave a run through as to what I'm doing, but my current team is a bit different. So I had the unenviable task of moving from an operations development manager, which is one of, well, back then it was 10 principal inspectors in HSE that trained all of the new inspector recruits into the organisation. So I was involved in it's a level 11 postgrad diploma that's accredited by NEBOSH, level 11 because it's through the Scottish Qualifications Authority, it's equivalent of masters. The HSE have written themselves, and we deliver ourselves as well, so hence the 10 principal inspectors. But at the start of the national lockdown back in March 2020, I was moved out because I'd done nearly 5 years in that job to manage the construction team covering 3 counties, Surrey, Sussex and Kent. So I have only seen them probably half a dozen times all together face to face. We're spread around the 3 counties anyway, and we've got the 2 offices, one in Ashford, one in Oxted. You've got in the presentation there that my team is slightly different. It's a hybrid team because at the moment we're made up of trained inspectors and a very high number of trainees. And that's because the unit that I work in construction division covers London, Surrey, Sussex and Kent and East Anglia. And we've got 14, 15 trainees in the unit, 5 of which are in my team. And we're trying to sort of train in one area, and 2 of my trainees will go into London teams in due course. And the slightly different aspect to my team is that I manage another principal inspector. I peer manage them. They're on temporary promotion and they're managing the operational trained inspectors in the team to do the normal day job, whilst I centre on training and competence of the trainees. The day job is as it says at the bottom there. It can vary from asbestos inspections, cladding inspections, so that's looking at the recladding of buildings post Grenfell. We've done the COVID inspections. Those stopped at the start of this work year, but we still, HSE will still look at COVID, but in the laboratories that are doing the tests on COVID. Training visits, F10, so that's notifications of construction work, and then we'll look at concerns given to us by members of the public, employees, whatever, and then your traditional investigations of accidents or ill health. So we're kept busy, and thankfully we're getting a couple of new members of staff into the team, our visiting officers. So they're not inspectors, but they will be trained to deal with employers' liability compulsory insurance work, as well as assisting us with investigational work. So taking statements, obtaining evidence and handling evidence and the such like. The reactive load, we have been manic. Really, COVID didn't stop us very much at all, maybe 6 weeks at the start of the COVID lockdowns, and then we've been out and about. We were key workers. So construction didn't really stop. There was maybe a couple of months where it was on lockdown, but then it started up again because everything needed to continue to move forward in a safe way. As I say, that's the load of work that we've done. You'll see that complaint investigations were very high during last year, so that was during COVID, and a lot of those complaints were about COVID controls on construction sites. They've tailed off, but still 170 odd in a year is a phenomenal amount that my teams had to deal with. RIDDOR investigations, so the number of accidents went down because there probably were less sites working and less people on the sites, but we've picked up again this year. And then inspections, our normal inspections have really taken over from where COVID concerns were, and COVID checks. Interesting, the COVID checks, we only started doing those after an announcement by the Prime Minister at the lectern at number 10 saying spot checks will be undertaken, and that's when we had to start doing those across all workplaces. And enforcement profile, reasonably similar. It's much of a muchness, bit of a dip during COVID, but again, it just gives an idea that that's where we are. And to give a comparison, HSE's two main operational divisions, one is construction, and then the other one's field operations. So field operations deals with everything other than construction in simple terms, but they don't deal with the high risk chemicals, offshore and stuff like that. But they will deal with blue light services, schools, manufacturing, food manufacture, woodworking, engineering, all of that. So there's a team that covers Kent, and those are the numbers. They've got similar number of staff for the one county that I've got for 3, so it is comparable. And again, they're not too dissimilar in the work loadings, but again, it just gives an idea as to the work that's going on, certainly out of the southeast. One of the things that is still around, and COVID sort of brought this in, the Crown Prosecution Service brought in guidance in relation to trying to limit, if they could, some of the cases that are going into the court system. Now, of course, COVID put a stop to all of those that are already in the court system until control measures were in place in the various courts, whether it be magistrates or Crown courts. But we needed to review our cases and using the public interest test. And actually it was to ask the question, which is unusual within HSE, as to whether a caution's suitable. So that's something that you might have seen on the telly where people are given roadside cautions. It's a similar type of thing where if somebody admits their guilt, could be an organisation, could be an individual, if they admit their guilt for us in writing, then we could offer a caution. Of course, a lot of our incidents that we're involved in are either looking at ill health where people have been disabled, or looked at, we've got fatalities or people that have lost limbs. Now, I don't think any of us would argue that the public interest would say a caution is suitable for that. They should be put in front of the court system and answer either in front of a judge and jury or in front of a judge if they pleaded. So that's there. I had to review a good number of cases and record decisions made, but that still remains. It hasn't been removed from CPS's website, so the link that is available in the PDF download will work and take you to the guidance. So people often ask me, well, what happens in court? So this is a list of all of the cases that we've had since April 21, and it runs through probably just over the 12 months. But you'll see some quite significant ones there where we've got a director put in prison for 4.5 years for a worker that fell from an unprotected roof. Quick background to that, it was a friend of his that was working for him. It was probably 4 stories up, I think, seaside type townhouse location. His friend had no precautions up there, worked a few weeks, and he fell off and died of injuries. The sentence was quite high because Mr. Big had just served the sentence for death by dangerous driving. So that aggravated his sentence. You know, he'd already taken the life of somebody and now he'd taken the life of somebody else. But you've got a range there. The fines where people's accounts show they can pay, the sort of unlimited fines, which is open to the court, you get higher levels. COVID has knocked back some of the fines because people's accounts have been restricted because of COVID stopping them undertaking work. So turnover and profit margin, well, turnover is the key one for sentencing. Their accounts are taken into account and the fines are lower. Our most recent case, oh, that's paused it again. Are you able to unpause your end?
No, I can't unpause it my end. Can you press stop pause? If you press where on the second one where it's got paused, if you press that again, it should start it again.
Let's see if we'll click to resume. So it's that one and get it back to there. So hopefully that's all showing again. I don't know why it keeps pausing when I'm pressing buttons just to move my screen on. There you go. I will try a different way of moving on. What's on the screen there, hopefully you can see it says total contractors. This involved a worker that did fall off an unsecured ladder, again a coastal site, and you had companies and directors all being prosecuted by the CPS. So the CPS made a decision to prosecute 2 directors for gross negligence manslaughter and also health and safety offences, and then their own companies as well were prosecuted in their own right. Now, the interesting one with this is the level of sentence for the one director for gross negligence manslaughter. Yeah, that's pretty high for somebody that's got no previous convictions. And then also the 18-month prison sentences for health and safety offences. Now, bear in mind, in the Crown Court, the maximum available to the judge is 2 years. So it gives a bit of a flavour as to how far below the bar the court thought this director was. Now, this was a trial. They didn't plead. They were found guilty of the offences. And the other director, he was acquitted of manslaughter, but again, he was put in prison for the health and safety offence, which normally that would be probably suspended or a community order. You might have curfew tagging, but to be sent to prison, and the judge said at sentencing, you were so far below that you deserve an immediate custodial sentence. I think that the messages are getting out. I was down in Brighton doing some inspections a couple of weeks ago and came across some people that knew Mr. Wenham, and the jungle drums have certainly been beating to what's actually happened, and directors are taking note. But it was a needless waste of a life that's led to this, and that type of justice doesn't bring the poor guy back. It might be an element of closure for the family of the deceased, but we should never get involved in these. An unsecured ladder, should never come to a fatality in this day and age. I've said about the fines being reduced due to the economic hit of COVID. The cases are now being heard face to face. There are some of the preliminary hearings being heard online, and lots of cases are being shifted around in a bigger area of the court system. So we've got ones that have, or would ordinarily be heard in Sussex are being moved into Hampshire, and they're just trying to get them into single places with district judges that know about health and safety. So, more efficient, more effective is probably the message to take from that. And you've got a list there of cases that are still due to come through. Again, the takeaway is more people are pleading not guilty. So we've got another trial coming up related to a fatality. The game that maybe companies or individuals play is, they'll plead not guilty and then change their plea at first hearing, whether that's first opportunity if they've gone through plea and case management hearings, all of the people before, so that the ones that did go to trial, they don't get any discount at all. Ordinarily, it'd be a third off if you do a timely guilty plea. So there are lots of cases still rumbling through, and you'll probably hear about them in the press. Just a bit on COVID, I don't want to dwell on it. It certainly changed the way that HSE had to work. A very, very odd situation of trying to overlay workplace controls and the more social aspect of public health legislation. That's certainly a place that I've never had to go in my time in HSE. And to be fair, I wouldn't want to go there again. The blurred lines make it very, very difficult. Is it COSH? Is it the general duties of the Act? Very, very difficult. Is somebody's exposure work related, or is it from home? It's so difficult. But hopefully people on the call will have made use of the guidance that HSE put together. There is still guidance around, and the links again will take you to those. There's still a lot of the COVID controls in place at workplaces. In construction, we're still seeing some of the canteen huts with segregated areas for people to eat, so there's still the social distancing. We'll certainly still see increased use of hand sanitizer, but then welfare facilities are still quite poor on a lot of construction sites, so it's doesn't really marry up. But the COVID side of things is still there, and we all know that, was it 1 in 20 people have COVID at the moment? It's just gone off the reporting radar. Our stats equate to where they are. From a COVID perspective, we still haven't published, as far as I'm aware, any data on COVID fatalities, because again, that's hard to work out. But again, we've got some of the estimates here. We had riddles coming through, and these statistics are available on our website. Minister responsible for HSE, I would suspect this will change post 5th of September, which is when a new Prime Minister will be installed in number 10. But currently, I did have a check yesterday, Chloe Smith is still the Minister responsible for HSE. She certainly didn't hand in resignation or anything like the others did, out of the 50-something in government that did hand in resignations. But the difficulty with ministers changing on a regular basis means that the relationship between HSE and the minister needs to start from scratch again. And I think that's the difficulty, and I've noticed that over the years. If you can have somebody in post for a good few years, then you've got that relationship there at ministerial level, and there's an understanding of what HSE get up to. But that's who it is at the moment. We will wait and see if she remains or doesn't. We have just put out our fatal statistics. Those came out a week ago. Those are on our website, and unfortunately, construction's there at the top again. quickly followed by agriculture. The only difference I would say with agriculture, and it's my background's agriculture, I joined as an agricultural inspector into HSE, is that it's only about, was it 2%? Might be 2% of the working population works in agriculture, and yet it equates for, what are we there, 22 out of, so a fifth of fatalities out of a sector that employs a couple of percent of the workforce. So, you know, things to be done still. We shouldn't have 120 odd fatalities. You know, it's sad, and each of those has got a very, very sad story to them. The other stats around it haven't been updated yet. Those will come out later in the year. So that's why the 142 in this sort of statistics overview is sort of 2020-21. But there'll be some key facts around in relation to, you know, ill health, which is still probably swept under the carpet a little bit more. There's more education on it. We're certainly pushing more as frontline inspectors on the health related issues and enforcing appropriately, but there's still some catch up to be done. Work related stress, depression, anxiety, so things like fit notes. Stress, technically a doctor shouldn't put on a fit note, it should be the depression or anxiety. But that aside, if work is affecting somebody's mental health, then clearly something needs to be done in the workplace to support and assist those workers that are affected. And certainly COVID has put people in that anxiety level, particularly if they're vulnerable or they're looking after people that are vulnerable. So I can see the stats for 21-22 probably increasing in that area. Very hard from an enforcing officer's perspective to enforce against, because again, is it work, is it home? It's probably a mix of the two. Which one broke the camel's back, as it were? So again, it's very, very difficult to enforce. But things like the mental health first aiders, you know, those are key in trying to deal with it at source before it becomes a problem and people are signed off work. And I would suspect a lot of you that are listening know that if people are off for any length of time, more than 6 months, the chances of them coming back to work are significantly reduced. And then they're a burden potentially on society and the taxpayer for supporting them when they're at home out of work because of ill health. So, you know, the mental health first aid is key in the workplace. HSE's got the Talking Toolkit. Again, I'm not going to go into detail. It's on our website. I've certainly used it at groups where I've attended on the Time to Talk Day, which tends to be in February each year. And it's about opening up the conversations. And that little guide is about employers, so managers, opening up conversations with their members of staff. And we shouldn't be frightened to talk about it. I talk about it with people because, yes, I've suffered from depression and anxiety. Depression probably because of work, anxiety because of home life. And I'm happy to talk about that because I wear heart on sleeve. And I think people ought to learn from others as they've worked through it. And actually work was helping me with anxiety. But I can talk about that with people outside of this meeting if they want to. The industry split again, and again, it's not unsurprising that we have agriculture and construction, workplace injury is up there. The ill health, education, public admin, health and social care, it's where it's reported. You probably won't get so much ill health reported in the stoic people that work in things like construction and agriculture, and that's why those are probably lower on the ill health side of things. Some hot off the press bits. HSE has finally got our business plan and our 10-year strategy agreed with our minister. Now, in the PDF, you should be able to click on those 2 images that will take you to the PDFs. It's worth having a look at both. Certainly the business plan, it's a bit of a transition plan from what we were doing to where we're hoping to go in the 10 years of the strategy. But it will give you an idea of what we're doing in the industries in a snippet. So worth a download and read if you want to know what we're up to as an organisation at a higher level. Health, so construction is running 2 health campaigns this year. We've done one through June, so the 4 weeks in June, which was on dust. So we were looking at exposure to wood dust and silica dust. We did just over 1,000 visits in those 4 weeks. And then we dealt with, apologise for abbreviations and acronyms, MECs, MECs, Matters of Evident Concern. So those things that jump out and bite the inspector of things like unsafe work at height, working in unshored excavations, dodgy electrics, you know, all of those things that we should deal with, those were dealt with at the same time as anything to do with respiratory risks. The results aren't published yet, so although I've seen some of them, my lips are sealed as to giving you more detail as to what's there. But what I can do is I can show you some of the things I found because I've been out and about as well as my team. People are thinking that Henry Hoover is a good piece of extraction on a construction site. Clearly not. You know, it's not got proper filtration on it. It certainly doesn't meet the requirements under COSH in relation to controlling people being exposed to dust. Those things have got bags in. A bag and a vacuum cleaner, you will all know if you've used one of those vacuum cleaners, as soon as you start it up, you'll get a plume of dust, but that's because it needs an element of dust surrounding the bag for it to work and keep the dust in the bag. You know, other posher types of Hoover, but they're still not filtered. They're domestic Hoovers. These are both taken at a site where they've taken down lath and plaster ceilings. And that picture on the right-hand side is actually in the welfare room. You can see the dust on the chair and debris. They had to clean that before I could write out the paperwork for the 2 companies working on that site. So they were all wet cleaning it because they couldn't sweep it. You know, other things that we are finding, you know, the classical brooms. You know, people shouldn't be sweeping up at all nowadays. It should be sucking up with a properly filtered vacuum. And these 2 pictures were taken on the same site, and they got an M-class extraction unit that could have had proper vacuum fitments on it, so they could have vacuumed up whatever they were sweeping up with that broom. So it's all down to planning, management, supervision, monitoring what's going on, and people are missing a trick. You know, we want the right respiratory protection, and I saw the full range. So we got FFP1. Yeah, that's one better than a rock and boulder mask for stopping that going down in your lungs. We got the P2 on the molded filter there, but the filter packs are out of date. And actually, we'd expect FFP3 for any wood dust and silica dust. And you can see the wood dust in the background. This was a shop fitter that we happened to walk past, walking from one site that we were aware of to another. I was out with a trainee and we went in there and they were circular sawing, where they were ripping old scaffold boards down to board out this new coffee shop. Both of them had beards, so they weren't face fit tested. And since that visit, they bought powered full face helmets that don't need to be face fit tested, that are fitted with P3 filtration. So they spent probably £250, £300 on each unit. But again, they were saying, well, we never knew about this. Well, ignorance isn't a defence. They were close, they weren't prohibited, to be fair, these 2 guys, because the risk was significant. But they have taking the remedial measures, which is what our interventions are about. We want compliance. It's probably rude for me not to mention Brexit. I know it's been and gone, but there is still a lot of work being undertaken by HSE. Bottom right-hand corner, yeah, we've taken on a lot of work that was done across Europe in relation to biocides, plant protection products. So that's the stuff that, you know, weed killers, REACH, that's any chemicals, you know, chemicals label and packaging, CLP, product safety. You know, our teams that are dealing with those have increased significantly. And this is where it doesn't necessarily marry up with some of the narrative that was coming from the government about cutting civil service workforce back to pre-Brexit levels or pre-2016 levels, because our enforcement has increased significantly because of what we've now got to manage within the UK. And I do still call it the UK because we assist with some of the stuff that happens in Northern Ireland. The majority of our work is Great Britain based, but there are some bits that we go across the whole of the UK. Now, product safety is one of those. And we do, you know, I've lost members of my team to the product safety team that are looking at all of the stuff that has to come in and conform to the standards for conformity assessment in the UK. So CE marking, European conformity, you know, if somebody in the UK supplies into both the UK market and the European market, it has to be labelled with a CE and a UKCA, so UK conformity assessment mark. All of those links are live. You know, it's a right old rabbit warren of guidance, legislation, and how it's dealt with. I used to deal with it a lot at the coalface when I was managing a previous team where we were dealing with suppliers, certainly of agricultural and forestry equipment, but it's now even more convoluted. But that's where we are. The guidance is there in relation to new work equipment. Grenfell. So, you know, we've just had the 5-year anniversary. The Building Safety Regulator is on its way. The Building Safety Act 2022 has been passed, got royal assent. That happened, you know, probably a month, 2 months ago. They're now looking at the legislation to then put everything in place for the enforcement aspect and the setting up proper of the Building Safety Regulator. Currently resides within HSE. Will that remain? I don't know. But it is a competence-based system, and it'll be drawing on expertise from planning, building control, HSE from a construction perspective, but then fire and rescue for the fire safety aspects. All of those links are live, take you to the places to read the pertinent documentation. You know, the teams locally are dealing with the recladding. So, you know, anything that has got the cladding that was similar to Grenfell, that have no real fire protection to them, then we're looking at how those are being stripped off, because then that creates a fire risk in its own right of an occupied building. HSE have enforcement responsibility married up with fire and rescue authorities. I came across a place that was stripping off the old bits. It had trade units, ground floor, and then I think three levels of flats above, and they'd stripped off all of the old insulative material, and whilst it was waiting to be collected, it was piled up like a bonfire waiting to happen in an undercroft. Suffice to say, when I let fire and rescue know, it was shifted within hours, because it was an occupied building. I couldn't enforce under CDM. So, you know, the general fire precautions and fire safety stuff had to fall back to local fire and rescue. But people just don't think. But watch this space on Building Safety Regulator. It's got quite a presence on social media, certainly LinkedIn. It does. Yeah, it's going to move fast, and people are going to be recruited in there very, very quickly if it's going to start in the next year. We've got our pages being built at the moment. There's lots of information there. You can subscribe to the BSR e-bulletin, as you can to many other subject areas. And there is a YouTube video clip. It's about 5 minutes long, that sort of explains what the process is going to be with BSR. One interesting thing was that Michael Gove, in his previous job as the Levelling Up Minister, he made it clear that industry, so the developers, should pay for the recladding of buildings 11 to 18 metres high. So that was bringing it down a bit of a notch. So it'll be interesting how that pans out. At the moment, there are government grants for the 18 metres plus, and that's part of the reason why HSE staff are inspecting, because there needs to be a bit of a check and a balance of where public money is being spent. So not only are we looking at health and safety, the fallout from that is information can be passed back as to whether it's a properly managed contract, which I think is only fair and right when there's a lot of public money being spent. But again, that link on that page will take you to the letter from Michael Gove. It's pretty blunt to the point, and we've just got to see how that falls out of things. One thing that came in April was the change of PPE and linking into the workers that have been sort of in the grey area periphery. Again, it's using some of the definitions out of other legislation, so Employment Rights Act, but basically, if you've got workers working for you, they're under your control, they need to be supplied with PPE. A lot of people were doing it, but there are some areas where it wasn't happening. And again, the link takes you to the guidance on that. Fee for intervention, so HSE's cost recovery system. Still get a bit of pushback now and again out on sites when we talk about, well, we found something wrong, we're putting something in writing because we found a breach. In cost recovery terms, that's a material breach, so we send a notification of contravention and notices, so the legal notices of improvement or prohibition if applicable. It's currently £163 an hour. That went up 1st of April with inflation, so that was before inflation started running away, so you can expect it to go up 1st of April next year. If inflation remains as it is, it will go up by sort of 9–10%. But we claim every 6 minutes of our time. That's for ease. Of course, an hour can be split into tenths. So £16.30 for every 6 minutes. And our revenue from that, boy, did it get hit with COVID. So a 45% reduction. But actually, there was a surplus this time, so we were actually covering our costs. In previous years, we haven't necessarily covered our costs. It does help fund us, because over the years we've had probably a 55–60% reduction in central government funding. So funding streams for us, yes, our work out there at the coalface, we've got our chemicals work and offshore work, which is fees payable. We get costs back from court, we don't get anything from the fines, those go straight into Treasury. So, it's important stuff, and there is logic to the fact that the taxpayer shouldn't pay for people that are doing things wrong. Those that are doing it wrong should pay to put it right. So they're covering that cost. So, that's here, our guidance is there, and there's checks and balances if people don't agree, and they can make queries, raise disputes, and everything like that. I mentioned inspectors, trainee inspectors at the start. So we took in a recruitment in February, 1st of February, and that's where two of my ones that are going back to London probably at the end of September came in. We've probably got another couple coming in October. Colleagues are currently doing the assessment centres, which are how we decide who's offered the jobs. Those are happening at the moment. There's no doubt that the training workload locally is going to be very heavy. Lots of people say, you see jobs, well, I see jobs on LinkedIn and similar places that are saying, we'd like to have ex-HSE staff. And the reason being is that our training is second to none. The postgraduate diploma, I would class it as a beast. It's a regulator's diploma. It's nothing like any of the health and safety diplomas that you'll find out there. It's certainly not anything like NIBOSH's ordinary diploma. And NIBOSH are seeing that because they've accredited it as well. So they're in doing evaluations of how we're delivering. It's very much tailored to inspection, investigation and enforcement. There are loads of exams, assignments, and in my previous job I spent an awful lot of time marking said assignments and exams, as well as delivering the training to the members of staff. Just to give you an idea, it's something like, and this is from memory, something like 650 hours of face-to-face training on health and safety and legal issues, and then about 1,600 hours of on-the-job vocational learning, and all that has to be passed. So there's 7 exams, 2 assignments and a competency framework that needs to be successfully completed before somebody is a fully fledged inspector and gets promoted. Takes probably 2.5 to 3 years to get the diploma. So it's a lot of investment. Where can you find out what's going on? Well, HSE does have a social media presence. I would say it's more LinkedIn and Twitter, probably less so on Facebook, but we do have a Facebook page and we have a YouTube channel. So again, those links work. It's worth following HSE's LinkedIn pages because you'll certainly get the updates of legislation and things like our campaigns, what we're finding. The construction campaign, they're putting out video snips from inspectors out on site, so this is what we found and this is what companies have done. So yeah, tune in to that. And what's coming? Well, dare I say, more of the same. For construction, we pick our visits based on the notifications that we get at construction sites, but let's face it, it's not hard to find a construction site, because if you look for a skip and a scaffold, you'll find somewhere to go as an inspector in a construction team. We are looking at the health issues in the way that we assess compliance, and we are politically driven to do cladding inspections that come our way, and asbestos visits, that's looking at licensed asbestos removal contractors. So that's what we're doing. They've already paid a license fee that covers a certain number of visits from HSE inspectors. So we're out doing that, and I've got a couple of visits to do next week in Kent, out to knock on the door of a couple of contractors to say, hello, I've come to make your day and assess how you're doing. Mandatory investigations, those are still going to happen. The thing that's really good this year is we haven't had a fatality that my team's had to deal with from the 1st of April. That is unusual, and I hope I'm not tempting fate, but that is unusual not to have had at least one fatality by now across 3 counties. Complaint investigations, those aren't going away. We do pick up intelligence from other agencies, so it might be Home Office Enforcement, it might be Gangmaster Licensing and Labour Abuse Authority, and local police actually will give us information, fire and rescue, and we'll give information back as well if we deem it necessary. So if we think there's modern slavery going on, then we'll obviously be talking to the police and potentially Home Office Enforcement. And I think, again, that's only right, that we should share information if we consider there to be concerns in relation to the people that we're coming across. Health campaign, the second one, bit of a heads up, that's going to be October, and that's going to be on manual handling in construction. So that's going to be interesting. We haven't done that for a little while, so it'll be interesting what the industry is doing on manual handling training, controls and the such like. And then we're never going to get away from training new trainee inspectors. You know, we're barely plugging the holes with people that are retiring or moving on to different jobs in either different government organisations or in the private sector. So we're recruiting to keep status quo, really. So that's ongoing. And you know, there are some of us that aren't getting any younger, so we do need the trainees in and trained up to take over from some of us that are at the other end of the age spectrum. And that's my lot. A little bit longer than I'd hoped, probably because of some of my technical issues, but it does give time for some questions. Now, I'm loath to start pressing buttons in case I don't turn my webcam back on.
Would you like me to turn your webcam back on, or would you like to leave it on?
No, I'm happy for the webcam to be on, and I will let go of my mouse, and then I'm not going to pause or turn anything off inadvertently.
Okay, I'm going to send you a webcam request. Let's do it. There we go. Nice and easy. So we have lots of questions. So let's start with a couple of simpler ones first. The first one, I assume you all know when this came in because I was faffing about, so I didn't notice. Sorry, what does CD stand for in your presentation?
Construction Division.
Okay, excellent. That was from Amanda, so we'll do that one. A comment from Mark saying, credit to you as I do the same. I think that's when you were talking about dealing with stress and using work, and happy to talk to people about your experiences. Someone has asked if they can have your contact details, please. Would you be happy for that?
Yeah. Yeah,
okay,
email's probably the easiest, to be fair, because I'm out and about a lot, but yes, happy for people to have that.
Okay, that was a question from Dave. So Dave, I'll send you the email address after the webinar for you. That's a nice quick one. So I've got one now about air conditioning, and it's a two-part question. One was a question, then one was to clarify. This is from James. What do you think the conversation around aircon and possible overloading of workplaces will continue? And then that was clarified with the aircon question is in regards to the introduction of fresh air as per building regulations.
I probably don't know the answer to that. We've had to deal with air conditioning and COVID loading. So whether that's partly where it's going, the building regs, I have no idea about that, to be fair. And we come in after the fact, but we have had to get involved with air conditioning units that are recycling within workplaces with COVID loading. And that's still an issue now. As an example, we in the Ashford office of HSE, we've got 4 recirculating air conditioning units that we still can't use because the risk of COVID loading in those rooms by turning them on is increased significantly. And of course, if you open the windows, you just knacker your air conditioning units. So it's probably, I wouldn't even know a friend to phone on the building regs. The experts on that are building control.
Okay, thank you for that. So we've got one in relation to stress here from Zara. Given the high stats in relation to stress, has HSE prosecuted any organisation in relation to not managing risk-related stress? If yes, sorry, I can only see half the question. Let me try that again. Given the high stats in relation to stress, has the HSE prosecuted any organisation in relation to not managing work-related stress? If yes, which regulations specifically were used?
As far as I'm aware, the answer is no. And I can probably stretch that further. I think HSE over the years has only ever issued one enforcement notice, which happened to be on an NHS trust for not managing stress in the workplace, and it was all based around the stress management standard guidance, and I think that notice would have been served under the management regulations, so Management of Health and Safety at Work regs of 1999. It goes back to what I said. It's very, very difficult to get the evidence to prove that it's work related, for one, because there are so many factors involved. Difficult. I'd find it hard from somebody that's actually suffered from the depression side of things to actually try and overlay that into a workplace and enforce it as a regulator. It's not easy. We'd have to get our psychologists and social scientists, behavioural specialists all involved, I think. But the easy answer to that is no, we haven't prosecuted.
Thank you for that. This one, I assume, is going back to Grenfell. Excuse me a second, I'm just going to cough. I'm just going to mute. Okay, so assuming this one goes back to Grenfell, the cladding was an issue. How did the HSE tackle the occupants' mentality with regard to the blocking of fire escapes?
Again, I'm not close to that one, but there's an issue here that HSE don't have the enforcing authority rights, so the VIREs in legal terms, for occupied buildings and fire precautions. So we only have it if it's a construction site. Now that is clearly going to change when the building safety regulator comes on stream full bore with all of its regulatory powers. But at the moment, that would sit, the blocking of fire exits in a high rise that's occupied would sit with the local fire and rescue. So for Grenfell, that was London Fire Brigade. It's bad enough us trying to have the conversations with construction sites or having the advisory conversations with duty holders that have blocked fire exits in factories to get them to understand actually the risk that they're putting there by blocking them. So I think HSE's involvement all the while we've got BSR under our banner will get greater as soon as BSR comes on stream with the regulations next year.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We've still got quite a few questions, but I'm not sure you'll be able to answer all of these. Can the military be held to account for failures regarding HSE?
Yes. So Crown bodies, the MOD, whether it be Land, Army, Navy, whatever parts of the Ministry of Defence, the organisation can be Crown censured or have Crown notices, so they are Crown immune. As a principal inspector, I've authorised the Crown censure of Highways England and the Ministry of Defence for fatalities to people in their employ. Individuals, so you could have, captain, major, lieutenant, colonel, whatever in the army aren't Crown immune. So if it's not in a theatre of war, health and safety applies to them doing operations on the soil of Great Britain. And the Crown censure I did was a fatality to a fusilier who was shot in the neck at the ranges down here in Kent. It was the last live fire exercise before deployment to Afghanistan, and they did it all wrong, and they were Crown censured for that. So they admitted if they weren't Crown immune. So that was Secretary of State for Defence admitted that if it wasn't for us being Crown immune, we would have been prosecuted, and that appears on our prosecutions database. So you can search on Ministry of Defence and you'll find the Crown censures on our website.
Thank you. If you're okay for a couple of minutes, let's try and answer some of these. I'm just trying to pick one. If people have sent more than one, I'm just trying to pick one from everyone. Why has the list of licensed asbestos contractors gone from the HSE website?
That, as far as I'm aware, is an issue with the software that it sits on and potential vulnerability. So it will be coming back because I know there's databases running in the background because I have access to them as an asbestos licensing principal inspector. So that will come back. It's something that needs to be solved. All I can do is apologise on behalf of the organisation that it's been taken offline for a certain amount of time. But watch this space, it will be back.
Thank you, Mike. I've never seen so many questions for a webinar since I've been doing these. We've got 3 left. Let's see if we can squeeze them all in. Is there a HSE point of contact for residential property management, built environment, and the role of managing agents within the Safety Act, etc.?
I'm sure there will be, and it's probably worth a look at the BSR pages. You know, I can't claim to be an expert on the building safety regulator side of things because, you know, I'm not involved in it. I just pick up on the periphery, but there certainly will be, because all of those people have got key parts to play when the new regulations come into force. So have a look on our website, and do have a look on LinkedIn and the BSR stream of information that comes out on there. So sorry, I can't be more specific.
Thank you. We've got 3 questions. Let's see
No,
if we
fine.
can.
I'm okay.
And if you haven't got the time or you can't answer them, please feel free to say no. So what would it take for the HSE to add stress that is diagnosed as work-related to the list of RID or reportable conditions in its own right and not due to the length of absence?
I think that's a wider ranging question that probably goes back to whether it's an industrial disease as well. At the moment, it's not something that should go on a footnote because it's not classed as something that can. I think the conversations are being had. Whether that would happen, you know, it's down to how good because it would. Now let's backtrack. If it sits in with ill health normally, then it has to be based on a medical professional's diagnosis before a RID or report comes in. So it'd then be down to the consistency of doctors reporting it in a fair and consistent way. I haven't seen anything to suggest that it's going to be added anytime soon. And again, I'm not sure, other than statistics, as to how we can take that forward. But, you know, I don't know policy-wise what's happening. So it may happen, I don't know.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to I've got 3 more questions, but I'm just going to ask the 2 because I know we're starting to run over time. So the last but 1 question is, great presentation, thank you. With the proposed government minister changes effect from 5th of September, how will this impact the building regulator and the proposed government financial commitments for the removal of ACMs on buildings 11 to 18 meters, if that makes any sense?
No, that is linking back to Michael Gove's letter saying developers will have to pay. I don't think that political stance will change. You know, it's too high, and I'm just really going high level on this. It's too political and in the public domain for any backtrack on that to happen. So I think what's in place now will continue. I would be very surprised if health and safety in general was drawn into any of the things that potential new prime ministers are using as leverage as part of their campaigns. It hasn't happened in the past. But things like Grenfell, I don't think that will change. You know, it's been said it's government policy that things have got to change. BSR's going to come into play, and it needs to. And you know, we shouldn't forget that there's still a potential criminal court case that could fall out of the investigation into Grenfell as well. And you know, there's 71 people that died. So that's still rumbling on. So you've got the landlord, you've got London Fire Brigade in the mix, you've got individuals in there as part of the planning and contractors. So I don't think it will change.
Okay, thank you. Doing a marvellous job at answering these questions. Going to ask the last question now, and then we'll get Paul on to close off the webinar. So, following the charge for manslaughter, would EHS officers be liable to similar charges for hidden residual hazards that cause an accident?
Try and unpick that. So I'm assuming you're meaning consultants in that, environmental health and safety people. You know, if there's a failing on behalf of somebody else that's caused a company or an individual to commit an offence, then we have systems built into the Health and Safety at Work Act. So Section 36 covers consultants and consultancy companies. So if they do something that creates a problem for somebody else, then we can prosecute them for the same offence. It has been done. Certainly, we've had a prosecution of a health and safety consultancy in Kent a good few years back that gave not the best advice, that then led to people being exposed to an asthmagen in a workplace that then created ill health. So we prosecuted both the company for the ill health of their worker and the consultancy company for giving, in simple terms, not good enough advice that led to ill health. So there are avenues, but you'd have to prove that, as we did with those 2 directors that are currently serving prison terms, that they were woefully short of the mark and they were negligent and reckless in their jobs at that high level. So as a director or a manager, that's Section 37. An external organisation would be Section 36 of the Act. So hopefully that's answered it and I've understood the question in the right way.
Great, thank you. Paul, do you want to come on to close off for us?
I'm back. Yes, thank you very much, Julie. Really appreciate the questions, and again, thank you for everyone that's put a question in. It's really appreciated. And lastly, thank you to Mike. Fantastic presentation as normal, and thanks very much again for your time and sharing your knowledge with us this afternoon. Just one quick point from me before we sign off. We do have some more upcoming webinars for the South East branch of the IIRSM. So we've got a webinar on the 28th of July, and that is a mental health webinar that's obviously going to be delivered. And then on the 23rd of August, we have got the Kent Police and Crime Commissioner, who's going to come on for us. So those of you who are sort of South East centric, the PCC for Kent is going to come on and do a presentation on making Kent safer. So again, yeah, thank you guys for joining us this lunchtime. It is really appreciated, and again, thank you, Mike, for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone. The recording will be uploaded onto the IIRSM YouTube channel after the event, and the certificates will be sent out tomorrow. So I'd like to wish everyone a good afternoon or evening wherever you are, and hope to see you at the next webinar. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.